there's such a strong people component to cybersecurity. Being in the field as long as I've been, there's always been a focus, more so of a focus on, sort of the processes, the technologies, and going full tilt with that. But one of the things I've learned the most recently has been being able to lead with empathy and leading with kindness. Especially during the pandemic, when we're all stretched a mile thin, we're all pulled in a million different directions. Many of us on our last nerves, kind of thing. By being compassionate and really understanding where people are, that holds great value for people in cybersecurity roles. So I'd say that's the thing I've learned the most.
You're listening to KBcast, the cybersecurity podcast for all executives. Cutting through the jargon and hype to understand the landscape where risk and technology meet. Now, here's your host, Carissa Breen.
Dom, welcome back to the show. I'm really excited to have you back. We spoke a fair few weeks ago, and I know that I was saying you were probably a second guest when we first started KBcast a long time ago. So it's really, really awesome to get you back, because not only do I see you as a friend, I really like your attitude, not only in your personal life, but towards the industry as well. So I know that we are going to be talking about a very interesting topic today, something that I've never actually spoken about on the show. And I think it's going to be interesting because I believe a lot of people probably think it, but they don't actually talk about it. So I'm definitely keen to jump into that. But before we do that, I'm curious to know, what have you learned since we've had you on the show, which was quite long ago now, but I'm just keen to understand, what are some of your experiences and things that you've sort of picked up along the way?
Well, first off, KB, it's a pleasure to be back. I'm really grateful to be on the show again, and I appreciate your friendship so much. Not only are you one of my favorite Australians, but you're one of my favorite people. You're good people, and like I said, I always energized by our conversation. So it's wonderful to be back. And to answer your question there, what have I learned since the long time since I was last on your great podcast here? I'd say for me, it was really understanding that there's such a strong people component to cybersecurity. Being in the field as long as I've been, there's always been a focus, more so of a focus on, sort of the processes, the technologies, and going full tilt with that. But one of the things I've learned the most recently has been being able to lead with empathy and leading with kindness. Especially during the pandemic, when we're all stretched a mile thin, we're all pulled in a million different directions. Many of us on our last nerves, kind of thing. By being compassionate and really understanding where people are, that holds great value for people in cybersecurity roles. So I'd say that's the thing I've learned the most.
Yeah, I really love that you say that, because I was talking to someone yesterday about empathy and having kindness for other people, and probably sort of what's that saying, walking a mile in someone else's shoes. I always like to put myself in someone else's situation to see it from their point of view. Do you sort of think that people, particularly in our space, kind of forget that? Because sometimes I do see how other people speak to one another online, how people have spoken to me in the past, which is completely wild, and I would never speak to someone the way in which people have spoken to me. Where do you think that sort of comes from?
Yeah, I'd say it still stems from the fact that for a lot of people, empathy and kindness isn't the default. A lot of people will actually exert more energy by being negative or directing hateful comments towards other people, or resentment. That requires more energy. If a lot of people understood not just the benefits of leading with empathy and kindness, but the fact that you can do that. I think a lot of people forget that, it's an option, right? Your default doesn't have to be being a mean ogre like person. To me, when I see people resonating with those and vibrating on those, I'll refer to as positive frequencies, by leading with kindness, leading with empathy, you tend to see them having greater positive outcomes more frequently, whether that be in life, in work, whether it be in cybersecurity. I think that's something which is really important for cybersecurity professionals, whether you're dealing with clients, whether you're dealing with your internal team, by leading with empathy and leading with compassion and leading with kindness, you're going to be furthering your security agenda more than if you're just an old-fashioned stick in the mud.
100%. I totally agree with you. And I know that I do try to come from the perspective around a branding point of view. Like, for example, if I'm sitting there and I'm negative to someone online because I don't know, I didn't like the way they said something, someone else may see that. They may not like me as an individual. They may not want to work with my company. So I think people don't zoom out and look at it from that perspective. And also, like, it's just being mean. Like, if you don't have something nice to say, just don't say it at all, is my philosophy. It's what my parents have taught me. So I guess sometimes I am shocked by the behavior of other people that are adults that have lived longer on the earth than I have. But I guess people just don't have the same upbringing or the same sort of life experiences, or they don't actually see the full picture. So I hope that today some of the things that we talk about is just going to plant the seed for how people are operating between one another in the space.
Absolutely, and just hitting on the branding piece, quickly. One of the strategies, and I'll just zero in on a platform like LinkedIn. One of the strategies which I embarked on just before the pandemic was to just consistently engage with other people's content, leaving uplifting, positive comments. So as you know, social media is rife with negativity and negative trolls, and I saw the opportunity to be. I've self-branded myself as a positive troll, even though I'm 6'2" and don't quite look like a troll. But it's been something which, as I've embarked on and been consistent with that over 20 months, I am now seeing the fruits of by being consistently kind, and I'll use the word consistently and emphasize that has just absolutely blossomed my brand, my company's brand, and has just allowed us to have an increase in workflow, all based off people seeing me consistently being kind online. So even from just a business perspective, if you don't want to be kind just for the fact that it is the right thing to do, I truly am seeing that by leading with kindness, that has a very positive impact on your bottom line.
Absolutely. I absolutely love that. So thank you so much for sharing that. One of the things I want to get into now, which we sort of came up with when we were talking and just speaking randomly about things, is a very interesting topic, which is security ghosting. Now, people may have heard this term in the dating world, getting ghosted by people, especially if you're on dating applications like Tinder and things like that. So we're obviously not talking about that, but what we are sort of applying this term to in this security industry. So, Dom, can you please just provide your definition of security ghosting so people listening are aware of what we are referring to? And it's definitely not on the dating side of it, but more so what we're sort of seeing in our industry.
Absolutely, and please feel free to append what I'm saying, KB. I'm going off memory from our conversation, but for me, one of the things when I think about with security ghosting is by engagement with vendors. So if you are, as an example, a security vendor and you're reaching out to people, and people, you're engaged with from a perspective, then all of a sudden they disappear. That's an element of security ghosting. Or even the reverse. I've seen that where you're an organization and you need the services of a certain potential vendor. You reach out to them, and if they see it's not a right fit, they'll just all of a sudden ghost you, and those communications go quiet. So I mean, I've seen that happen both in my corporate job and obviously as an entrepreneur, selling security advisory services. I get ghosted all the time. I'll have someone reach out saying, "Hey, we came across your company website. Really interested in what you do. We think we could really benefit from those services. Can we set up a time to talk?" And then you send out an email, call them, nothing. That to me, at least, is what I've seen as being security ghosting.
Yeah, you're so right. And it happens a lot. And I mean, people that are probably listening to this episode are like, yeah, I've definitely been ghosted. I mean, it doesn't even matter which side of the coin that you're sort of looking from, like your vendor, you are an MSSP, an integrator. I mean, even from a client's point of view as well, an end client, like potentially they've been ghosted. Maybe it's from a recruiter, who knows? So why do you think people sort of ghost anyway? Like, it seems to be people are doing it more now, and I'm curious to know why.
Oh, that's such a good question, KB. It actually goes back to, I think, to maybe the root of where we started our conversation. To me, it circles around the fact there's still a lack of kindness and empathy towards people and towards each other, right? Even during the pandemic, when we're all stretched again a mile thin, we should be starting with kindness, recognizing that someone who's reaching out to you may be doing so because they're stressed out. They need to make sure that they have food on the for dinner for their family. Even just a simple yes or no, I'm interested. That can go a long way. And to me, it circles back to kindness. Even I know we're not talking about dating apps, but I think it's the same root of it, right? It's a fundamental lack of respect and kindness to your fellow human.
Well, I think I sort of think about it from a branding perspective. So if someone came to me and they, I don't know, inquired about some services and I just ghosted them, they're probably going to think pretty negatively of me. Like, I don't care whether you're a CISO, you're the Sultan of Brunei. I just believe you don't need to ghost.
Oh, absolutely. And back to what I was referring to earlier is like kindness being part of a brand and being, a key element of a brand. If you're the type of person and or vendor who is continuously ghosting people, eventually, especially in a community like cybersecurity, is still a relatively small community in the grand scheme of things. People talk, right, and your reputation that precedes you. So if you are the type of organization or type of person that is regularly ghosting people, that's going to hold you back in whether it be your career, that's going to hold your company back from a branding perspective. So to me, it's again, if you're not actively investing in making sure that how you communicate to people is in a kind and empathetic way, you're going to be tarnishing your brand.
Do you think that, for example, people that are in the buying sort of side of things, in the buying chair, let's call it, they don't care because they're like, well, I hold all the power, I hold all of the cards, I've just ghosted the last 15 people, I don't really care. Do you think that's their mentality, or do you think they're just so spread thin, they're stressed out, they're overworked? What do you think it is specifically?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And what I will say is I'll paint different pictures in terms of I'd say almost an overall experience. Whether that be with our clients or people that I coach. So security, let's say security managers that I see or security directors who will always make sure that they go out their way to politely send emails, whether it's a yes, no, or what have you, to vendors. They always make sure that they leave a response. Those types of security people, they end up going further in their career, and I've seen that. But B, more importantly, or maybe not necessarily more importantly, but at least from a short-term perspective, I should say that they and whatever vendor they end up going with, they end up having a more positive relationship moving forward. It ends up being a more long-term relationship as well, because that type of person tends to be more transparent. They tend to be more authentic, and they tend to have much more in-depth and meaningful relationships. If you contrast that with security managers who will just ghost other vendors or ghost salespeople and will only have communication with whatever vendor they end up selecting, those types of people, again, not necessarily trying to brush them all with a broad stroke, but generally speaking, those types of people tend to have more of a fixed mindset. They tend not to go as far in their career, right? Their growth is limited, and the relationship that they have with that vendor ends up being much more short term, and the relationship doesn't tend to be as meaningful as it is with someone who is more empathetic and more kind in terms of their communication style.
And I can understand it from their point of view. I do know some vendors can be quite aggressive. So maybe if they've said no and then after a while they just keep coming back, they're going to just maybe ghost them. So I can kind of understand from that perspective. But if they've approached a company, you've gone through the whole process, you sent out your, I don't know, your services, statement of work, whatever you want to call it, your quote, and then you hear nothing, just dead air. That's the part I don't quite get still, because I mean, I've worked on a client side, I've worked in consulting side. So for me, when I transitioned out of working at a client, it's almost like no one wanted to know me. And I've seen this happen time and time again. So when I speak to people that are now entrepreneurs or they want to go out on their own, I said, look, you've been a client your whole life. You watch the tables turn. People will not want to know you simply because now you're on the services or the vendor land side, and people's mindset towards you can change quite rapidly. Are you sort of seeing the same sort of things, or what's your view on that?
Yeah, absolutely, KB, and that's a really key caveat that you bring up there again about the in terms of where they are in the communication life cycle, shall we say? If you've been clear with someone and have said no, we're not moving ahead with you, and they keep sending you emails, I don't consider that, and you don't respond to that, I don't consider that ghosting, because you've been very clear and you've now ended what, at least at that point in time, where the relationship is. But to your point, if you send out a statement of work or a proposal and the person was really interested and then you don't hear back from them, that is ghosting.
That is the definition of a ghost.
Right? Because there was not a clear closure in terms of where things are.
Yep, gotcha.
Yeah, exactly. So again, it's again, salespeople, because they come in all shapes and sizes. And you mentioned the word aggressive. I completely agree with you there. Right, the ones that are overly aggressive, sometimes you have no choice but to ignore and block or what have you.
And I know that does happen, but I do know from talking to yourself, people, even in my own experience, like, yes, people ghost. And why do you think people just can't say, no, Dom, I'm not interested, but thank you very much for your time? Like, how hard is it just to say no? Even if you couldn't be bothered saying, hi, Dom, just say no. That is better than the person sitting there wondering, like, this person was so keen for my services, and then all of a sudden I got nothing. Like, this person literally just disappeared off the face of the earth. I've heard it, especially if you're a vendor listening to this episode, like, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I know multiple people that I know that have been through this, but how hard is just a simple no?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I'll actually share a quick story in which, during COVID, we were in the process of closing a deal with a client, and they actually agreed to it, and they said, "Yep, we'll pay the invoice," and they did. But then he disappeared. So they paid, and then I didn't hear from them for close to 5 weeks. And I thought, well, this is really strange. I mean, from a Chuckles perspective, I thought, oh, I wish all clients were like this. They pay us and they disappear. But realistically, I was like, wow, this is really, really strange. And it turned out he ended up following up with me about 6 weeks later. He had been in the ICU, intensive care unit, with COVID for almost a month and a half. And I think again, it does give a good reminder that sometimes that life events do happen, or people are incredibly busy. Sometimes it does just slip someone's mind. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard from a prospect, when I follow up with them after a few weeks, if I don't hear from them, they say, hey, you know what, I totally forgot about this. Thank you so much for your polite follow-up. Yes, I want to proceed with this, or no, I don't, and here's why. So it is okay to follow up. And again, speaking with kindness, again, it's understandable that people have a lot of things going on, especially during a pandemic, especially for working from home. I know for me, I pretty much forget everything during the day. My toddler interrupts me multiple times during a day, and if I haven't written something down, I'll forget to do it. Right. So I think it's understandable, but it's again understanding that there are certain situations where it does happen, but it's not truly ghosting. It's just a matter of almost forgetfulness, or just being lost in the rat race, so to speak. And that's why, again, polite follow-ups are okay. It's when, again, you start going on borderline harassment. If you don't hear from them, my rule of thumb is, if you don't hear from them after 3 follow-ups, then just politely say in the last one, you know what, don't want to harass you anymore. If you are interested in following up with me, here's my email and contact. Please feel free to reach out anytime. Right. So I sort of take a rule of 3 in terms of polite follow-up and like I said, leading with kindness there.
So what you're saying, that there are levels of ghosting. So you've got your top level, which is your pure ghost, don't care, you've no response. Then you've sort of got maybe someone that disappears and then they come back on, so they ghost for a bit, but they come back. Or then you've actually said no, but people just don't take no for an answer, and they just ferocious with their sort of approach. Would you say that those are maybe the levels that we're dealing with?
I like that, and I even referred to that almost as an accidental ghost, right? They're not, there's intentional ghosts, and then there's accidental ghosts, almost like intentional insiders and accidental insiders.
That is, I love that intentional ghost. Okay, so let's zoom in on the intentional ghost. What is the mindset of an intentional ghost? So just for example, I'm trying to put I just could never do this, but if I put myself in their position, what's going through my head? Is it I know that I'm in a level of seniority that I don't care, therefore I'm just going to intentionally ghost you because I still own the power at the end of the day? Would you say that's where the intentional ghosting side of things sort of is stem from?
I think that's a fair comment, KB. And again, it's emphasizing that word intentional. I think it's when someone is knowingly acting in a way that they are ghosting someone, right? Again, let's say you get an email and you read and you read it, or you see who it's from, and you delete it or you choose to ignore it. You're taking an active step there. You are actively ignoring it, right? That's opposed to, let's say, it accidentally gets filed in someone's junk folder, or that person has been sick for 4 weeks, and then when they come back to a massively overloaded inbox, and they simply skip over your email because there's so much email to sift through. They're not being intentional in terms of skipping you there. They're being accidental.
So would you say that the people that are in that intentional ghost, would you say that it is quite a conscious decision to be like, oh, Dom's emailed me again, like stuff that guy? Would you say that that is their mindset? For some of the people, obviously we are talking about certain percentages. We're not talking about everyone here. Would that be where their mind goes, that they just like, I don't want to respond back to your email because I've got the power and I don't care. I don't care how I treat you because I still am in a position of power regardless on how I treat you. Would you say that is their mindset?
I would say so, and like you said there, I mean, we're to a degree we're speaking in broad strokes, but by and far, I would say that is a fair way to sort of break it down in terms of, again, the accidental versus intentional. I think absolutely that's how I would view it.
So let's go on to the accidental side of things. So I know that I've spoken to people, especially in startups. They're like, oh, that person didn't get back to me, KB. And I mean, I've been doing this for a while. And I said, look, this person that you're dealing with, you don't know anything about their life, right? Like maybe their kid's having difficulties, maybe their wife's not well, maybe, I don't know, their mum or dad died recently, so maybe that's their personal stuff. Maybe they've had to fire 5 people in their team and they're then carrying the burden of the workload. Like I always say, have some level of empathy that you really don't know, because I can relate when people message me a lot on social media and I don't respond. It's not because I don't care. It's probably, I wouldn't say it's an accidental ghost. It's a delayed response because I also am a human being as well. I also have my own life, believe it or not. I do have a life outside of work. I have a partner as well. So sometimes I think maybe the accidental ghost is people are human beings at the end of the day and things do happen. And so maybe that their response isn't in your arbitrary timeline. So a lot of people that I have seen think if I message you, Dom, and you don't respond in my belief of when you should respond because I've made up some arbitrary timeline, then therefore I believe you've ghosted me. Are you sort of seeing that as well?
Yeah, I would say so, and I think that's really important to, again, like you were saying there, and you said this, throughout our conversation today, KB, is, again, putting yourself in someone else's shoes. As an example, if I reach out to someone on a platform like LinkedIn, I recognize that there's some people, they are just buried in direct messages, right? For me, I'm lucky if I get, 5 or 6 direct messages a day, right? Responding to that is far easier for me. I know people who get, hundreds of DMs a day. I can't imagine responding to hundreds of DMs a day, right? So I recognize that if I'm messaging someone, they may see it, but there may be a delay in responding to it. So again, I don't think that they're not quite fully a ghost, because they generally will follow up on it. But sometimes, there's you need to just have a couple follow ups. There's someone in particular on LinkedIn as an example. I was having conversations, at least through various comments on their post, and then I said, hey, I'll send you a DM, and I did, and they saw it, and I thought, okay, I'll wait, and then they didn't respond, and I was like, oh, I wonder what happened there, and they kept commenting on my post, I commented on their post, and after a week, I thought, I'll just do a polite follow up, and I did it when they were online. And then they sent me a note saying, I am so sorry. I saw it. I was going to respond, forgot about it. And then she said I got buried in 100 other DMs. So I think, again, back to the whole almost theme of the show for today is, again, empathy, kindness, understanding that just because someone doesn't respond, it doesn't necessarily have to always be that worst case intentional ghost outcome. It could be, but again, if there's enough breadcrumbs in place there, like where the person has been enthusiastic, the person has, you've established a bit of a relationship with them. Often, then there's, like I said, an accidental or maybe even a delayed a ghost, so to speak. So I think again, it's really important that, to your point, KB, we put ourselves in other people's shoes, right? There could be they have a life outside of work and social media. They could have a sick child, right? Their partner could be sick. They themselves could be going through something, right? You just don't know. So again, by understanding and not defaulting to worst case outcome, where you like automatically think, oh, this person is ghosting me, that person's a jerk. Don't always think and assume worst case, right? We should all be giving each other the benefit of the doubt.
That's so true. Because I always say to people, like, you're not their first priority. Like, you're probably like their 50th priority. You've reached out to them about doing some services. They're like, yeah, it's probably important, but they've got like their wife, their kids, their parents, their staff. Like, who knows? Like, maybe they're renovating their house and that's stressful. So I think it comes from a level of experience with knowing, just don't take it personally. I always say to people, like, stop taking it personally. It's not anything against you. It's on them. They don't decide to respond. That's their problem, not your problem. Unless, of course, you're being quite aggressive and, almost stalking them. Like, you don't do that. But this is something that I think people really need to learn, that just don't take it personally. Would you say people do take it personally? Like, oh, okay, well, Dom didn't respond to me, so maybe I'm not good enough. Maybe he doesn't like me. I don't know if we should be doing these absolute statements. Like, just because someone doesn't respond and you don't even know them doesn't mean that they hate you.
And that's exactly the point, KB, is that so many of us are we have this preconceived notion that we always have to jump to worst case outcome, right? It's let's say you apply to a school that you want to go to, a university or college, and you don't hear back from a week or two. Automatically, like, oh, I didn't get in, right? Very rarely are we conditioned to think, hey, you know what, there could be a delay, maybe mail is slow, maybe the review process has been delayed. So many of us always jump to worst case outcome, right? I think a lot of that is rooted in the fact that we do live in a very anxiety driven society. There's a reason why a lot of people suffer from anxiety. So I think it's really important that we always have almost a moment of pause, right? And try and to never jump to worst case outcome, right? That is something that so many of us do by default. But I always say, never, never, when you're going through that, always give someone the benefit of the doubt, right? Don't always assume negative intent, just because, I even have people, I mean, it's like my mother-in-law, she's like, oh, someone looked at me weird across the street. I say, well, they may have been looking at someone behind you, or they may have been looking at something else, right? You can't always assume negative intent, right? That to me, again, is negative energy. That is bringing out the worst in humanity. Again, if we want to bring out the best in ourselves and each other, right? Assume positive intent, right? And that ties back to, again, leading with kindness and leading with compassion and empathy from the heart.
Oh my gosh, I'm this anxiety ridden person. I definitely think like that. Like, why is that person looking at me? I was like that as a child, so I always still freak out about it as well. But just going back to your point, anxiety ridden world, do you think it's because with social media now, again, it's these arbitrary timelines. It's like, okay, I've messaged Dom. I mean, I probably message you when it's like 2 a.m. in your time as well. I'm in a different time zone to you. So there's that aspect of it. But do you think that people just think that because they have access to someone that they can message, that they should be getting back to them? Is that where that sort of anxiety is sort of derived from, would you say?
Oh, for sure. And especially from the rise of smartphones, and when we sold out our soul, so to speak, in terms of being available 24/7, right? I mean, even if you think about from a work perspective, right? A lot of people think that if they receive an email outside of work hours, that especially if it's from their manager, that they should respond to it. In fact, I have a lot of conversations with our clients where I say, what, if you're working in the evening and you send out an email, be very clear that you're not expecting a response from them at 10 o'clock at night. I know for myself, I do a lot of work after my kids go to bed, because that's the only time I can be productive. And I'll send out emails at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, my time, and I live in the Pacific time zone. And I always tell people, whenever you get this message, don't feel the urge to have to respond right away, right? We're in that type of culture where there's that expectation where if you have your phone and your email is connected to that, you should be responding right away. Why aren't we hearing back from you? So I think it's really important from a cultural perspective that organizations set the tone. That it's almost like when an email gets there, it's like when the actual physical mail gets to your mailbox. When the mail man or woman delivers the mail, you shouldn't necessarily have to just run right away to get the mail. It's okay if you let it lay there for a few hours. I mean, around my house, getting the mail is probably the most exciting thing that happens during our day. So we go right away. But for most people, it's a matter of it's just being held there until you get to it.
Yeah, I like that so much. And I think that's the way I used to be like that. Like someone messaged me, I have to message them back. And I mean, I try to do my best, but I've also got boundaries in place. And it's funny now. I mean, I've got two phones. So one phone is completely no emails. Only my family have that number. Like no one, not even certain friends have that number, because sometimes I just want to be left alone when people message you on every single platform possible. And then sometimes I'll read things as well, then I'll forget. I'm notorious for that. So I can understand when people are on social media, on LinkedIn, they read it and then they forget. I do that constantly. But again, it doesn't mean I'm ghosting. But so just say someone is ghosting and then they're aware of it. How do you think that people, will they sort of get known for being like the security ghoster, like, oh, that CySO just ghosts constantly? And if so, what does that sort of version of themselves look like down the line?
The best approximation I can give to that is, I'd say it's someone who tends to have a very fixed mindset. Someone who doesn't see the best in themselves or in others. It's someone who is not able to reach their full potential because they have a fixed mindset versus a growth mindset. It's someone who may be stuck in a role that they're unhappy with, but they don't have the internal belief in themselves to unleash their full potential, and as such, that often manifests in negative communication styles and negative energy towards other people, because that's just a matter of a lack of confidence. And we see that with some people where they project their lack of confidence onto others. Right? If they themselves can't succeed, they'll tear others down. So I generally, like I said, generally speaking, I don't see many growth mindset oriented people who believe in leading with kindness and compassion, being people who actively go out of their way to ghost people. Right? It tends to be people, like I said, who have very negative energy, very fixed mindset, and are stuck in roles that they're very unhappy with.
Totally understand what you're saying. So as an example, from a scenario point of view, just say a company, or I was the company, I went to you, was curious about your services, did everything, and then you sent me your quote or whatever it is, and then I ghosted you. What happens then if I saw you at a security conference potentially in 6 months? How do you handle that situation? So I always like to think, look, I don't know what happened. Maybe that person had a bad day. Who knows? Water under the bridge. And I sort of just ignore it. I don't go, hey, are you the one that ghosted me? How would you handle that? And what sort of advice would you have for people that likely will run into that person again that has already been ghosted?
You know what? And that's a really really good question, KB. And that's definitely happened to me. And I was certainly more pre-COVID. But one of the things which I've really seen be what I feel is a powerful way of doing it is to, again, not be confrontational about it, but not to ignore it either. Again, I will often lead from a place of genuine concern. So as an example, if we were working on sending over a statement of work and we never heard back, and I see that person 6 months down the road, we say, hey, we haven't. Hope everything is okay. We never did hear back from the statement of work or the proposal. That's cool if you guys didn't go ahead with us. That's cool, but we genuinely want to make sure that everything was okay, and that just because we didn't hear back from you. Again, again, being fairly informal about it, and again, focusing more so on their well-being and the well-being of their team. I think it's a way to at least help provide some closure, and if nothing else, maybe even further the relationship. Right. A lot of people actually appreciate the fact that you don't come in with a full head of steam and tear them a new one. Other people will appreciate that you're not maybe ignoring the elephant in the room. Again, to me, it always goes back to, again, just being authentic, being transparent, being real with someone, but still being kind and compassionate. You'd be amazed at the doors that opens. And even if they say, and a lot of people actually had this happen where someone had completely missed the statement of work that I sent over, and I met them at a conference a few months down the road, and he was just genuinely embarrassed. He said, I really wanted to go ahead with you. He said, I just totally forgot about it. And they didn't go ahead with anyone on that project. And he said, tell you what, we have a new project, it's under the RFP threshold. How about we have you guys do that for us? And boom, we got work right out of that. And to this day, that person is a very good friend of mine. Again, it's because we took the time to, again, approach it with kindness, and to just approach it, like I said, from a genuine place of concern.
That's awesome. I really love that. I hope most people sort of take your advice on board and apply it to their own scenarios. Would you also say that, just say example, I was the ghoster again, I saw you at a conference. Do you think people's default position is to avoid? They're aware, or I'm aware, that I've ghosted you. They don't want to then engage with you. So how do you sort of reignite that sort of conversation? Do you think that as you would go in, everything that you've just said, to not hold them too accountable, or maybe just start afresh, like as if it didn't happen? How do you think it is normal that people are avoiding? Because it's awkward, right? It can be super awkward. And I think that people don't like confrontation. They don't want to be in situations where they feel on the back foot or they're having to defend their position.
Oh, for sure, KB. And to me, I think it comes down to, again, you don't have to necessarily hit that head on, but even just saying something like, "Hey, we haven't chatted with you in a few months. Just want to make sure things are going okay. When things get busy at work, did you lose a team member?" And then they may say, "Oh yeah, work's been absolutely crazy. I haven't had a chance to catch up on emails or what have you." Again, by focusing more so, like I said, on them and their well-being, their workload, things that they may be struggling with right now, you're at least able to at least restart that conversation, and like I said, do so in a way that's not adversarial, right? Rather than coming in and say, "Hey, we spent 2 days coming up with that proposal, we never heard back from you. Let's take this outside so we can settle this." Doing it in a way where, again, you're focusing on their well-being. This didn't happen to me, but happened to a friend of mine who's also a consultant, and he ended up meeting someone that he had sent a proposal to. That he actually met them when he was just out at a restaurant, and he bumped into him, and they ended up having a conversation and just asked how things were going, and turned out the same day that he sent out the his proposal, his prospect, that the prospect's mother died, and the guy just took a leave of absence for almost 2 months, and because he was just shattered by it, and he forgot all the things he was working on, and they ended up reconnecting, and my friend, like me, believes in leading with empathy and compassion, and they end up really bonding, and he talked about openly about his mom, and they ended up a few months down the road, after they restarted that relationship, my friend ended up winning them as a client. So again, it's by, again, put yourself, at the end of the day, we're all humans, right? And we need to connect as humans, right? Bad things happen to us on a daily basis, right? But again, when we connect with ourselves and connect with others at that human level, at that emotional level, and like I said, that genuinely caring and compassionate level, that's where magic happens, and my what really won my friend's prospect over was that my friend said to him, he said, "What, I too lost my mom about a year and a half ago. Here's some of the things that have sort of helped me get through the past year," and the prospect really appreciated that. right? It wasn't just a, oh, my condolences, let's touch base in 2 weeks kind of thing, right? That's there's no emotion to that. There's no
Mm,
sense of actually caring the fact that that person lost his mother, right? But
yeah.
by saying, you know what, I understand what you're going through. I too lost someone, lost my mom. She was super close to me. Again, you're connecting, right? You're developing such a deep, visceral human connection there.
Mm.
Whether or not a sale happened at that point was irrelevant because they developed a very, very strong friendship from that point forward. And now that prospect has become a client who engages him year after year after year after year, all because he showed that he cared,
And genuinely cared, like you said, like, oh,
genuinely cared.
like,
Absolutely.
oh, your condolences, and then back on to business. No, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, it's a long term game. So if you're just thinking, oh, well, I just want to get this deal over the line, I don't think in the end it's that fixed mindset. It's about playing the long term game. And sometimes you're going to lose a deal, but you may win that deal in 2 years' time. So that is sort of the mindset you've got to look at it from. Would you also say as well that people ghost because they're embarrassed about a situation? And what I mean by that is maybe they've spent 6 months looking at a vendor, but then their whole budget got cut because COVID happened. One of their clients went bankrupt, and then all of a sudden they've got no budget. Do you think it's then hard to go back to a vendor to then say, hey, I'm so sorry, our budget's being cut? Do you think they feel embarrassed perhaps by having to go back and say that?
You know what? Again, that to me again speaks to the strength of the relationship and why, um, you know, um, when I think about sales, I think about leading with friendship, right? To me, the ones where I've established and worked on developing a relationship and meaningful friendship, you're cultivating a very transparent and open communication channel. So if they say, hey, you know what, Dom, um, because of COVID, the budget got slashed. This is all we can do this year. I'll say, you know what, I understand. I understand because we too are having to cut costs as well. Here, what type of budget do you have available? What type of things are you hoping to achieve with that budget? And then we work collaboratively on figuring out what we can do. Right? If they're not transparent with us and we're not transparent with them, then you can't end up creating and collaborating on a really creative solution. Right? But when you again invest in the relationship, invest in the friendship. And again, this is why it's so important that for me, again, I hate terms like sales quota, right? A sales quota dehumanizes your clients, right? At the end of the day, I truly believe that each and every one of our clients are meaningful relationships, right? Many of them are meaningful friendships that I hope to have for many, many years to come. I don't see them as a quota, and I think it's super important that when you invest in that relationship, it allows you to have the confidence and almost create the right environment to have those types of transparent conversations, right? And that's what's super important for, again, when you think big picture, right? A good meaningful relationship and a good meaningful friendship is far more valuable over a 20-25 year period than trying nickel and dime some quote unquote client for a one-time deal.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you on that point. Do you sort of believe that this is just part of what happens with all of this ghosting stuff, though? Like we talked about the intentional ghost, the accidental ghost, the levels of ghosting. And then is this just something that people in the industry just have to endure? Is this just how it is and we just don't take it personally? And all the sort of the advice you gave before on how to handle being ghosted, how to sort of recover about when someone's ghosting you. How do you sort of see this moving forward?
Boy, you're asking me really good questions. To me, I truly believe that we're going to, especially over the coming years, people who still stick to, and I'll just use the term loosely, old school sales techniques, and that involves stuff like ghosting. Those types of people are going to be at a competitive disadvantage, right? To me, modern sales all centers around meaningful relationship building, genuinely caring about others, and genuinely leading with kindness and compassion and empathy, right? And humanizing each and every person that you talk to. People who embrace that approach, and again, if you embrace that approach, ghosting doesn't exist, right? So those types of people are set up for an extremely high competitive advantage compared to those who don't take that approach. So I truly believe over the next decade, we're going to see that true modern approach to sales really, really, really take off.
Do you think that almost, I mean, now people are calling people out in the industry if, I think there are some people calling about, like, I don't know, men that are sleazy, for example. Like, that's one element of it. But then do you think people will start calling out that people who do ghost, like you are the known ghoster? Do you think we're going to get to that stage? Because it is a respect thing. Like, I can totally understand. And tables turn, right? Like, just because you are now in a position, you may need me because maybe I become your boss then down the line. Like, you just don't know how things operate. Do you think we'll get to that stage? And like, people don't want to work with these people at the end of the day. Just because you're in a position of power does not mean that it gives you the authority and the right to treat people without any respect.
Yeah, and that's such a good point, KB. To me again, um, it again when you talk, you mentioned the word respect. That to me is what it all centers around. Because again, if you're some sales development rep or what have you, and you're just viewing everyone that you reach out to as a number, you're not respecting them. You're not respecting them as a human. And furthermore, if your boss is telling you, "Hey, how many calls did you make today?" Again, something like a call is dehumanizing it, right? It's more of how many relationships did you start off today? How many friendships did you kick off, right? How many relationships did you take from being sort of, just meeting someone to now being something more meaningful, right? If we start focusing on sales metrics where we're actually humanizing prospects rather than dehumanizing them, the respect factor is going to go up, right? Because it stands to reason that if you are viewing them as humans, you're respecting the fact that they are human beings with lives, with other commitments, worries, issues, and everything that goes around the human experience.
Do you think so as well? Because people nowadays want to do their research online. So there's going to be a lot less need for people to be aggressive and calling people up and sales quotas and get on the phones. Like, that Mad Men era style environment is going to dissipate. People hate it. They feel harassed. They feel that like they are just a number, or they're just a way for people to get a better car because they're a salesperson. So do you think that this potentially will just change the game because people will not take calls from people if they outreach to them? They're going to want to do their own due diligence, their own reconnaissance work on a particular product, service, whoever, and therefore it's going to decrease potentially then the communication for people being outwardly aggressive in terms of their outreach style?
Yeah, and I think that's such a good point. I think really we're going to see less of a reliance on, because right now sales is more focused on quantity than it is quality, right? It's a salesperson who called 500 prospects. That person's a hero, right? But the person who developed 3 meaningful relationships, according to a lot of sales metrics a lot of organizations use, that person's a failure, right? They failed at their sales job, right? I truly believe that over time, and it's going to take time, as like I said, there's a lot of people who still hold the Anchorman school of thought from 1970s book to sales. I think a lot of them, as they retire, I think a lot of those dated concepts are going to go out to pasture, right? I truly believe that again, it's going to be focusing more on quality rather than quantity, right? And again, quality, you achieve quality by investing meaningfully in those relationships, by, like I said, actually expressing genuine care about someone, and that all ties back, like I said, to compassion and empathy and kindness.
No, you're absolutely right. I really love everything that you said today. And it's so true and it's so real. And I know everyone to some degree would have faced this. Whether you're in a client or not, it doesn't matter. You would have faced this sometime in your life. So I really appreciate you being honest, sharing your thoughts, sharing your own experiences of how you've been ghosted yourself. So really appreciate it, Dom. If people have a question for you that I didn't ask you today about ghosting or other types of things, how can they get in contact with you?
Oh, I appreciate that, KB. I mean, people can reach out via my company website, and that's cyber.sc, or they can reach out to me on LinkedIn. Just look up Dominic Vogel. I'm the only one on there, and always appreciate when people reach out, follow me, engage with my content. Always love developing new and meaningful relationships.
Awesome. Well, really appreciate it again, Dom. Can't wait to get you back, and thank you so much for your time.
That was amazing, KB. Appreciate you to the moon and back. Thank you so much, my friend. Appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in. We hope that you found today's episode useful and you took away a few key points. Don't forget to subscribe to our podcast to get our latest episodes. If you'd like to find out how KBI can help grow your cyber business, then please head over to kbi.digital.
This podcast was brought to you by KBI.media, the voice of cyber.